Bienvenidos a todos. Welcome everyone. Once again, we're here in a coffee break. I hope that you have your coffee ready. And so today we're going to have a great event. I think exploring new mechanisms of cooperation for the future of the 1944 U.S.-Mexico Water Treaty. Dun, 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 dun. And this is happening 2 days before October 25th, which is actually when the water cycle will expire and some things are going to happen there. So very excited to have all of you here. Now, what we're going to be doing is this. So this is the topic. Today we have a very great colleague scientists invited for this topic. But before introducing each of them, I just want to make sure that we provide our thanks to hey, my alma mater, Hokum Horns, the Texas University, the University of Texas at Austin, the Arizona Water Resources Research Center, Texas Water Resources Institute, the NatBank, the North American Development Bank, TCQ, and also a place that I work with, the California Institute for Water Resources, UCANR. So allow me to introduce first Rosario. She's going to be moderating. And I know that we can have a lot of introductions. Rosario, one of my most esteemed colleagues, an expert in transboundary basins, groundwater throughout Mexico, the US, and a lot more. She's water management. She got her PhD in water management and hydrologic sciences, associate graduate faculty at Texas A&M, leading US-Mexico Aquifer Assessment Program for the state of Texas and TWRI, and a lot of good experience there in water law and policy. Ivonne Cruz. Ivonne, she's a researcher at the Center for the US and Mexico Rice University and a faculty member in the Masters of Global Affairs program at Rice University. Her work focuses on sustainability, corporate social impact, climate change, and the human dimensions of global and environmental change. 15 years of experience as a researcher and consultant, and she has collaborated with EDF, UNEP, UNIDO, and the Global Environment Facility, NOAA, the Government of Mexico, among others. Gonzalo, once again, good seeing you here. Thank you for coming. Gonzalo Hatch Kuri, Associate Professor at the National School of Earth Sciences at UNAM, la Escuela Nacional de Ciencias de la Tierra. Gonzalo is a geographer, an environmental and water law and water specialist and professor at UNAM. He completed 2 postdoctoral programs, the first in the North American Strategic Studies at CISAN, UNAM, and the second in Integrated Water Management at the Autonomous University of Querétaro, la UAC. Since 2018, he has been a member of the Mexico's National System of Researcher, currently at level 1, and his research focuses on environmental governance and management of water from an interdisciplinary perspective, emphasizing the legal and territorial regulation. A lot of research outreach and publications, and a very well-known water warrior along the transboundary basins. Gonzalo, welcome. Irasema, good to have you here. Irasema is the director and professor of the School of Transborder Studies at ASU, Arizona State University. And she holds a PhD in political science from the University of Arizona, and her research focuses on human rights, environmental cooperation, and US-Mexico border politics. A former executive director of the Commission for Environmental Cooperation of North America. And she also served in leadership roles at the UT El Paso, on multiple US and international advisory boards, appointments by President Barack Obama. Bienvenida, Irasema, welcome.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you
now,
very much.
Rosario, I think we'll go to you.
Thank you, Sam. Good afternoon, everyone. This is our possible our last coffee break of the year because we have other initiatives coming up next month. But this is the best way to wrap up water issues between Mexico and the US. I believe that we are living a threshold before and after the 1944 treaty, and also before and after the condition of the systems, of the transboundary water systems in the US-Mexico border. So I'm very happy to moderate this panel. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Ivonne, Gonzalo, Irasema, for agreeing to be here and discuss this. Let's use the time that we have to share our thoughts or recommendations with the purpose to propose, with the purpose to look for options, with the purpose to be creative. I think we have a great opportunity to be creative at this point because we have the opening, right? There's a big door of not knowing what to do. So let's be creative and propose. And with that, Mario Lopez was supposed to be here today. He had an emergency that he had to attend, but he sends his apologies to the rest of the panel and of course to the audience today. And that being said, we're going to have 3 questions for each one of you, 4 minutes for each one. But feel free to interact. Feel free to raise your hand. Feel free if you want to provide or comment on each other's comments. So we're here to listen to you and the audience as well. At the end of your interventions, we're going to have a Q&A session with the audience. So hopefully we're going to have a great discussion today. And I'm going to start with the first one. And it's like a thesis question, of course, as every other question that we have on our coffee breaks. And it reads, under current conditions, so this is where we are right now, this is our reality, both physically, politically, economically, socially, environmentally. What are the short and long-term scenarios the 1944 treaty may face towards the future under current conditions? And that I know that's a big complicated question to answer, but you have 4 minutes. And since Maddie is not here, I'm going to give you the liberty to start because we have 2 women and 1 man. So I don't want to point.
Gonzalo can begin. Gonzalo can begin.
Okay. Thank you, Irasema.
Bueno,
Gonzalo,
Irasema.
please. I'm sorry.
No, gracias.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this invitation, for having the opportunity to be here with you. It is always a great pleasure to meet colleagues that I have known for many years and to be able to have these kind of dialogues and conversations in different places. In fact, I agree with you, Rosario. This is a pretty difficult question, really hard to answer. And what I believe is that we have been going through a drought in the Rio Bravo and Rio Colorado basin. The climate change have had an impact over there. This is what some specialists said. So we have this scenario over there. There is some vulnerability. The drought is there, and we have these kind of situations that is going to be there for many years in the future. I don't know how many years it's going to last because I do not have a forecast, but I can ensure that at least this situation will be the same there in 10 or 15 years more. Because this is what we have seen since 2008 or 2007. We know that we are facing drought, but then there's depression regarding water demands in both countries. And this is something that is going to be there, the process of economical integration in North America. This is something that has been present in the north border of Mexico and the south of the United States. We have seen a success case. And so we are seeing that there is a change regarding industries and the growth of cities. At the same time, infrastructure is getting older. This is an infrastructure that was built to apply the Treaty of 1944. And this is another prescient point. Then we need to talk about something more political or technical. The treaty is facing more pressure because there is an interconnection. The water that can go to a basin can be lost in another basin. For example, if in the Rio Colorado basin there is a cooperation between Mexico and the United States, we can see that in the Rio Bravo basin, the cooperation is facing some issues because Mexico is not being able to deliver the water that should deliver to the United States. So I can see two scenarios at a short term. I can see a scenario where the situation is going to continue, the tension is going to increase, there's going to be frictions between the United States and Mexico, and we will have more minutes, emergency minutes. So the challenge for the relationship between Mexico and the United States is to avoid the trust between both countries to get worse. And on the other side, we need to take into account the crisis scenario. We know that climate is going in these extreme climate events are going to keep on happening. And so Mexico is going to have many issues to be able to deliver those quantities of water. And same for the United States. So what is going to happen? The relationship between Mexico and the United States is going to face many tensions. Maybe we have some legal issues, and maybe this is going to harm the relationship between both countries. I don't know what's going to happen, but this is my opinion.
Your microphone, Rosario, we cannot hear you. Excuse me. Thank you, Gonzalo. Thank you. Your comments are really very pertinent. Of course, we're facing a lot of challenges, but this is what it is. Irasema, what is your opinion regarding
Okay,
these
so
issues?
I think I prepared my comments in English. I hope that's okay.
It's okay.
Okay, so I think the 1944 treaty is a good treaty, but I think the situation, the circumstances have changed. So my concern moving forward with the treaty is, again, as Gonzalo mentioned, climate change, flooding, droughts, the bad use of water. I think we need to have better agricultural policies in both countries coming together because we're wasting a lot of water. I also see, especially here in Arizona, a big push to promote the semiconductor industry in Arizona and Sonora. And that industry requires the use of a lot of water. And no one wants to talk about where we're going to get this water, right? The Colorado River is being tapped by many cities, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Tucson, Las Vegas. I mean, they survive because they get water from the Colorado River. I'm also concerned with the exploitation of lithium, both in southern Arizona and in northern Mexico. And that too poses some challenges, and also mining operations that are increasing in this region, and what the impact will be on aquifers, on water usage in the future. I would like to see more integration of local governments, county governments, and state governments, because there are a lot of issues that impact local communities. And I'll give you a clear example of Nogales, Arizona, and Nogales, Sonora. Every single year, ever since I can remember, during the monsoon season in the summer, there are incredible floods in Nogales, Sonora that impact that community adversely, and subsequently Nogales, Arizona. And the infrastructure is not in place. The city of Nogales, Arizona has had many challenges with its infrastructure because of the stormwaters, and Nogales, Sonora is trying to find a way to mitigate the impact of these floods. So how do you help these two communities within the confines of the 1944 Water Treaty, which does is supposed to deal also with sanitation issues? How do they come together to address these problems, right? Because Nogales, Arizona has a very small tax base. There's not a lot of industries there, so there's not a lot of resources. And how can they pay for this infrastructure? Because it is a binational problem. So I think that's something that we need to address as well. I think the growing urbanization and industrialization in the border region also poses a challenge because more people requires more services, more water usage. And, we have like, Phoenix is the fifth largest city in the United States and one of the fastest growing, and we're getting a lot of people, and this is putting pressure on our water resources. So I want to be optimistic, but it's really been difficult for me lately considering the political climate. And I'm wondering, who's paying attention to these things and what would happen if someone in the State Department, we don't know who will be, how the IBWC will continue in the future. I mean, I was very happy that Maria Elena Giner was there for so long. I thought she did a great job because she's a border person and she really gets this. And so I'm a little worried about the future of the relationship and how these things will be handled. And if this administration on the US might say, well, we don't want to invest in this, we don't want to collaborate, what would happen to border communities and border people?
Thank you, Irasema. Yes, the worriness and the uncertainty goes beyond the 1944 treaty, definitely, in terms of water issues across the border. Ivonne, what are your thoughts in this scenario?
Well, thanks, Rosario. And I think Irasema just hit it right on. I guess, well, you don't know, and it will be published in a little while, but we had a podcast with Rosario this morning, and so we discussed a little bit on, about these issues as well. And there was this one thing that we didn't have a lot of time to cover, but we're going to talk about scenarios, and we are talking about opportunity windows that we can actually address and really look kind of forward thinking on how we could actually address some of the issues that are so pressing. We discussed the issue on the asymmetrical challenges of the two governments and where the political environment, it's not optimal, of course, to address, the issues of how the governments just address water rights and water allocations and everything at a very, very different scale. And they use different frameworks and regulatory aspects to address it. I think the issue on the policy aspect of water management, transboundary issues might just be very long term. At this moment, with the political environment, it's probably very difficult to address. But is the funding available to actually go forward on this infrastructure renewal, on this infrastructure investment? And we discuss what are the roles of, institutions like NatBank and who is investing in water, right? Because this is the other thing. How can we identify new investors that are probably not government oriented or government driven to invest in water, where then the private sector will definitely have to step in? And then the issue on the socioeconomic inequalities and the issue on equity and fairness on how these water allocations are distributed, right? We see that there's, we discussed this morning about how many lessons learned there are on the Colorado River that could be taken into the Rio Grande experience, but you cannot do, it's got to be kind of case by case, and definitely we don't have the same situations, we don't have the same stakeholders, we cannot rule one thing the other, but there's got to be some lessons learned that could be transferable somehow to as best practices that could be taken into consideration. Now, I think what we've called in the past hydro diplomacy might not be very much in place right now because of what we're talking about. But the issue of bringing in data-driven decision making, it's key, but not to forget the social dimension of the water of the users, right, of the end users. There is a big issue on the agricultural aspect on the use of water for sure. But then as we are looking for new solutions, right, we are also hitting very sensitive spots on excluding communities to make decisions about what it's going to happen to the water that they're using. So I know in like at least southern Texas, all these issues with the desal plants in like the area of Corpus Christi, and some of these examples that will require sitting everyone at the table to make decisions and try to bring it to a lower scale and try to understand what are these users' needs and responsibilities as well. So on that sense, I will stop it right there because I know that I just talked about a lot of things. But yeah, sort of wrapping it up, I think the levels of asymmetrical challenges, right, at the level of policy, of financing, and bringing the equity and fairness to an issue that touches on a lot of other aspects like the technical challenges, the environmental justice issues, and the end users will have to be probably taken into consideration to start thinking more holistically about the water issue in the border.
Thank you, Yvonne. Again, the challenges go beyond the framework of the treaty. So, and that this is not in the questions that you received, but I wonder, how do we see the treaty in the, I mean, do you think that what we're living right now is temporary in terms of the political agenda? We know that water issues have never been really a priority at binational level at the formal channels. Right now, I don't see definitely any sign that it is a priority, at least not at the scale that we wanted, or at least not from the angle that we wanted to have. So we understand that the treaty is the best instrument, legal instrument that exists to allocate water. And the inbuilt, adaptation process of the Minute process has helped the treaty to evolve and adapt to, particular circumstances. Of course, it's not perfect, but nothing is. So the treaty, is it facing a crisis, the treaty itself, or are we just seeing that the treaty needs to adapt more drastically? The treaty needs to wait for a better political environment? The treaty needs to be protected? The treaty needs to what? What does the treaty needs to do? Or is not the treaty and leave it alone and we just let it pass and better scenarios will come? I don't know. But from the information that we get from the media out there, we see everything, right? And we see a lot of comments relating to renegotiate the treaty, which I think we don't need to renegotiate. And what benefit would that give? Questions like that, questions to include the water topic as a prerequisite for other negotiations between the two countries, like commerce, for example, or the trade agreement, and more. So I see the treaty being contaminated right now. So I want to pick on your brain, and I know this was not on the questions I sent, but we are bringing up new topics into what you just brought into the table. So let's just drink another sip of coffee or beer or wine, whatever you want, and just dig into it. What is the role of the treaty? How should we treat the treaty at this point?
Well, if I may, I think the treaty needs to be protected because I think the treaty has worked. I fear that entering into renegotiation might go down the wrong path. But I really feel that you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So you've got to keep the treaty, and you need to maybe find other mechanisms to provide the flexibility that you need to make things work. There are a couple of things that need some work, I think. For example, I don't think we have ever adequately defined extraordinary drought. I think that's still a very ambiguous term. I still think that that needs some, fine tuning as to what, and also the length, what point are we in extraordinary drought? I think another thing that we need to take into account is the implementation time. Sometimes you have projects, you have infrastructure, you have conservation projects, you have institutional mechanisms that you want things to work, but things take time. You need funding and you need coordination. And so how do you make sure that you can implement things in a timely manner and have all the resources that you need to do so? I still think there are some gaps in the data monitoring, especially when it comes to groundwater and shared water aquifers. I don't think we have a good handle on, who's using what, what kind of, I know in El Paso and Juarez, there's this big, the aquifers is a big deal there. So how do we actually know who's using what and who's monitoring that? So I would like to see new mechanisms added, but I think once you start tampering with the treaty in and of itself, it might not be a good thing. I would like to work around it, with it, and create other mechanisms of cooperation.
Thank you, Irasema. Ivonne, what's your take on this?
I'm sorry, they always skip Gonzalo, but that's okay. We do ladies first. But anyways, I guess, yeah, again, Irasema, you're very knowledgeable, and I agree with you. I guess the maybe something to discuss will be the ability for institutions, or in this case, the treaty, to address these multifaceted or multidimensional issues that they're not always implicit, right? So how can we sort of, as Irasema said, create certain commissions to address this matter and have people that are, knowledgeable of the topic, and then try to disaggregate, right, the whole treaty as it was established 80 years ago, which is it's not completely outdated, but we didn't have to face many of the things that we are facing right now, and try to address it in a multidisciplinary way. Because we were listening this morning also about what you shared, Rosario, regarding the data, right? How do we do more research and expand the knowledge base on, climate modeling, on climate forecasting, for sure. Not only that, but also the anthropological part of things. Also, well, again, going back into the financing of issues, there should be for sure space to address things in like buckets, for instance, and that will probably give space for more specific, I would say, more specific plans of action could be within the treaty, and more policy-driven actions that will address certain things. Is the treaty the only resource we have? I would say no. Do we have to embrace it and try to contribute to it? Keep thinking that this is the main framework? Yes. But I guess as many of these instruments and frameworks, like the USMCA, it's just being revised and renegotiated. There could be space for the treaty to go through this. Maybe not just now, but I guess these instruments could be pushed into this direction, of course. Like a good revision of the treaty could be in place. I do agree with you in that, Rosario, and maybe try to understand or see it in a more compartmented way where it might just be more difficult and make it more hard to grasp, right? But it might give chance to have more specificity. ¿Cómo se dice esto en inglés? Especificidad en las acciones o en las
In the
mandatos
actions
tratados.
or in the mandates of the treaty.
Esa sería mi contribución.
That's what I think.
So I see it. So I'm hearing a trend, and I'm gonna get to you, Gonzalo, that probably the formal channels are exhausted. The federal channels are exhausted in the terms of dealing with water issues across the borders. So we need new channels. It looks to me, going back to local, county, state governance mechanisms that could be more efficient in addressing and protecting what we have in the treaty and improving at the same time that protecting it. Gonzalo, what are your thoughts on this?
Bueno, es como una pregunta que siempre hacen los medios de comunicación, ¿no?
It is a
¿Se
question
tiene que
that
renegociar
is
el
always
tratado?
asked
¿Sí o
by
no?
the media.
Y entonces te
The
sientes
treaty
esquinado.
should be negotiated
¿no?
or not.
Yo estoy
This is a
totalmente de
question
acuerdo
that
con
we
lo
always
que han
listen.
planteado tanto
Yes, I
Irasema como Ivonne.
completely agree
El tratado
together
de
with what
Aguas de
Irasema and Ivonne just said.
1944 es no solo un
The
documento,
treaty
es una institución,
1944,
¿no?
it is not
Y
only a
es una
document, it
institución
is an institution.
que es histórica.
It
Pienso
is
que a lo
a
mejor no se va a volver a
historical
repetir.
institution, and I believe that
Y
maybe
pienso
it
que
will not happen again. It is
los
something unique.
mecanismos con los que ha
And I
funcionado
believe
pues han
that
sido las actas, ¿no? Son unos
mechanisms
mecanismos
that were
innatos
there were
que han
minutes.
servido para que ambos
Those
gobiernos puedan
minutes
ir
were
desarrollando
some
la
mechanisms,
operativización del
and
tratado.
thanks to those mechanisms,
Y en ese
governments were able
sentido,
to
la
develop
SILA,
the
en ambas
operationalization of the
secciones, pues
treaty.
se ha
And in
convertido
that
también en
sense,
una institución que
La
ha
SILA
permitido de
it is
manera
an
ágil y
institution
eficiente
that
operativizarlos,
has
¿no? Entonces, no
allowed
podemos
to
prescindir de eso.
operate, to
Yo no
make it
sé a qué se
possible.
refieren las personas cuando se piensa
And I don't know
en
what people
renegociar el
think
tratado.
when
Más bien, yo
they
pienso que
talk about
tendríamos que pensar
renegotiating the
en
treaty.
minutas innovadoras
I
que
believe that we need to
introduzcan
think
otros
about
conceptos, ¿no?
innovative
Y digo
minutes that will
innovadoras
include
porque
new
tienen
concepts.
que
And
cambiar,
why do
¿no?
I use the term
Y
innovative?
si tanto se
Because I
habla
believe
del
that they need
cambio
to change.
climático, pues
If we are talking
entonces
about climate
tendríamos que
change, for
pensar
example,
en minutas
then
que estén
we need to think
adaptadas a
about
esas
minutes
nuevas
that are adapted to
fenómenos
those new
hidrometeorológicos que estamos viviendo, ¿no?
climate events that
Y
we are
entonces voy
facing
aquí a
right
plantear una
now.
idea.
And I'm going to share with
Estas
you an
minutas
idea.
innovadoras para el futuro tendrían que
So
pensar la idea
these
de la
new
flexibilidad.
minutes should think about
Quizás hacia allá
flexibility.
tendríamos que pensar en ser
Maybe we should
un tratado
think more
flexible, porque así es como lo
about
está
being a
planteando el
flexible
escenario
treaty,
de esta incertidumbre.
because we
Ahora
are
bien,
facing
por supuesto, hay
like a
situaciones que
complex
son
scenario where we don't know what will
innegables
happen.
y que yo creo
Of
que
course, there
tenemos
are some
que discutir
situations
también,
that we
que
need to
es,
talk about, of
al menos
course.
en México, no
In
lo sé,
Mexico,
discúlpenme, no lo sé a ciencia
I don't
cierta
know
en
if
los
that's the
Estados Unidos,
case
pero al
in
menos
the
en
United
México
States, but
necesitamos
in Mexico,
la Cancillería Mexicana, la
we
Comisión
need
Nacional del Agua, las
to
comisiones
have the
estatales,
National
y
Commission of
mira, retomo el
Water,
argumento de Irasema, ¿no? De
state
incorporar a todos, inclusive a los
commissions, and I
municipios.
take
Tenemos
what
que hacer un
Irasema
esfuerzo
said.
para
We need to include
modernizar
everyone,
la red de monitoreo,
including
¿no?
municipalities. We need
Incorporar
to make
nuevas
an effort
tecnologías. No sé si ya tendríamos que transitar hacia
to
totalmente
update
combinar
the
tecnologías
the
satelitales, ¿no?
monitoring networks,
Tecnologías
include new
que en tiempo
technologies. I don't
real
know if
nos
you've
digan,
seen
¿no? Con certeza
new
qué
technologies
es lo
that
que
will
está
allow
sucediendo, ¿no? En
us
los
to know
modelos
data in real
predictivos.
time, to
Pero
understand what
también,
is
no solo
happening
eso,
in
también
predictive
se tiene
models.
que crear una
And apart from
confianza
that,
en el uso
I
de esos
believe that we need
modelos
to
entre
create a
los
trust
concesionarios
when
y usuarios de
using
agua.
those
Y
models
eso significa también
among water
transitar
users.
hacia la democratización de la
And
información.
this means that we need to
Recuerdo yo que
democratize the
se
information.
había impulsado la inserción del modelo Riverware
I
para
remember
poder
that there
tener
was
un
a
modelo,
buzz
un
for the
pronóstico más
riverware
claro.
model, so that there will
En
be a
conversaciones,
more
digamos, con
clear
algunos concesionarios en
forecasting.
México, me decían, bueno, pues
And in
el
some
Riverware está ahí,
conversations in
pero no lo
Mexico,
sabemos
they
manejar.
were saying,
No,
yes,
no
Riverware
está
is over there, but we
accesible,
don't know
¿no?
how to manage.
Entonces,
It is not
puede ser que tengamos
accessible, so we don't
instrumentos
know
y
how to manage.
tecnologías
Maybe
que
we
van
do
a
have the
modernizar el
tools, we
monitoreo de
do
la cuenca,
have the
pero también es necesario
technologies
tener
that are
personal
going to
altamente
update the
calificado,
monitoring of the river, but we
instituciones
do need to have
renovadas que
high
permitan
qualified
transitar hacia
staff
mover esos
and
modelos. Si
new
tú no le
institutions
creas
that
una
will be
confianza
able to
a los
use these
concesionarios de
tools.
agua en estos modelos, ellos no van a querer
If
en
water
esto, ¿no?
institutions do not trust
Hay que
those
recordar que en
models,
general hay
they will
una
not want to use
desconfianza a
them.
veces hacia la ciencia,
In
¿no? Y hacia los
general,
datos, ¿no? No,
we
no
don't
es así,
trust
no puedo darlo
science
yo
or data.
por sentado. Yo lo que pienso entonces es que
So what I
tendríamos que
believe
pensar en cómo
is that
resolver
we need to
esa
think about
incertidumbre,
how
¿no?
to solve
Transitar hacia allá
that
y pensar,
uncertainty,
¿no? Quizás en ese paquete de minutas
that
innovadoras que
uncertainty,
introduzcan
and to think
la
about those
flexibilidad. ¿A qué me refiero con eso?
innovative
Como
minutes,
mecanismos de
including
adaptación
flexibility.
climática,
And what
¿no?
do I mean when I talk about
Y eso
flexibility?
entonces no es la
Some
gran,
climate adaptation
no
mechanisms.
creo que sea la gran ciencia, no creo que
I
necesites
don't believe
grandes
this is like a
reformas donde
big
el Senado de la
science.
República
I
tenga
don't
que
think
votar
that
para
we
cambiar el
need
Tratado de
to
Aguas del
have the
44,
votes of the
sigue estando en la cancha de la CIA.
Senate of the
Ese
Republic to
pienso que es
change
uno de estos
the
elementos.
Treaty of 1944. Not at all.
Sorry.
Rosario.
So I was kind of listening to all of this. I was thinking about some comments. I mean, one of the things I agree with Irasema and Ivonne that, I mean, the treaty, we should protect it. And it has been very successful, 332 minutes, 332 actas. So that means that the treaty has evolved. It has done pretty good. I think, yeah, what the shortcomings are the shared aquifers and the extraordinary drought, right? Within that one, and that we didn't include the aquifers. I was thinking about the Gonzalo's first comment about the drought and the droughts. And to me, I think we have created a man-made drought for a pretty long time. Like, we have way too much more water uses than, and I think, I'm not sure if that was Irasema's comment about the conditions have changed, but the basins that we have right now are not the basins that we were thought in the 1944. And yes, definitely the conditions have changed. And I think also the governance, like I'm thinking the IVWC is super cool institution, but it is an accounting, it just counts water. I hope that it would have a bigger role on actually making decisions, or because all of a sudden then we have a lot of these things. And I don't know, I was as I was kind of listening to all of this, I was thinking a little bit more that what you were saying, that I think there are things to do. I will not also throw the baby out of the water. I will actually keep that one there. But I think well, the only thing that is needed there is others. Anyway, sorry, but as I was just kind of listening to this, Rosario, perdón. We have the handout of Javier.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, we're gonna take, thank you, Sam. Yes, we cannot hold it. We're unable to hold it. We're gonna take questions at the end of the discussion with the panelists, and please, but if you can write your questions in the chat, then we can share them, and we can go over them. We're gonna have time for that. So, and we have gone through the second one. So, what should we not do? I know we're not going to throw the baby. We agree all on that. We're not going to throw the baby into the dirty water. Apart from that, what should we avoid because we live in cycles, right? That's how history gets done. And we're living a particular cycle right now. And I truly believe there's going to be a before and after 2025 in the terms of water sharing between the two countries. Not sure where it will go. 2 days we will know more. We are halfway through. When I say Mexico, when I say we, I refer to Mexico. Mexico is halfway through its water allocations. So there will need to be revisions to the treaty, one way or another. unless Mexico decides to keep delaying, using the extraordinary drought provision. But I don't think that's a feasible. I don't think that's a feasible option for the U.S. or Texas in this case. So the options to move forward, besides protecting the baby, in this case is a treaty, a very successful one. What should we avoid in the future?
Puedo decir algo. Creo que
I can say something.
Esta crisis
When trying to solve this crisis, this binational crisis, not only regarding the storage or allocation in the border, we are trying to create new solutions. And this is what I was saying before, technological diplomacy solutions, environmental solutions. But I believe it is really important to take into account that all these new approaches to try to solve this transboundary crisis need to be done in the right way. This means that we need to use technology in a correct way, not in an isolated way, taking into account the due diligence. Even though those technologies have been used before, even if they had been successful, we cannot create new solutions without taking into account the social part, for example, or like communities that need to leave their places. We cannot just create policies that are topped down. We need to have consultations. We need to take into account the participation of everyone. And especially, we cannot allow institutions to get weaker. Those institutions that are protecting the treaty, those institutions that have been protecting the treaty, they need to keep on reinforcing themselves, reinforcing their governance and the way of administrating the resource. So I believe that any solution that will be created needs to do it right with the due diligence processes, taking into account all the parts, the social part, the technological, political part, of course. It is pretty complicated taking into account the
That's
political
exactly, yeah.
situation that we are
Is this
facing
I
right
think
now.
it's a timing issue. Is this the right time to do this? And
Yeah.
that's something we need to
Yeah,
be
and
concerned with.
exactly, and that could be another comment here. Are we in the right time? Is not what we should avoid, but what we probably should not do right now.
It's not
Or
the right
wait.
time, but we can't freeze, right? We just do nothing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I bet. I won't keep talking because I can go on forever, but go ahead, Irasema.
I think
Irasema.
Gonzalo should go.
No,
¿Quieres que
okay,
siga?
Gonzalo.
Sí,
Gonzalo,
Gonzalo, ¿tú
if you-
sigues y luego yo o quieres tú
Bueno,
primero?
bueno,
Ok.
gracias. A
Ujú.
ver, yo pienso que lo que tendríamos que evitar,
So I
y
believe that
en
what we need
particular
to avoid,
las instituciones que están gestionando el
and
tratado,
in particular
es
those
actuar de
institutions that
manera,
are managing the treaty,
se tiene
it
que
is
actuar de manera más proactiva.
to
A
act
veces
in a
como que
reactive
parece
way.
que como
We
que
need to
las
act in a
actas
proactive
aparecen
way, because
así
sometimes
de un día
we
para
would say
otro
that
y son como
minutes
una
just appear
solución. Sobre
from
todo esto se ha
today
visto en los últimos años,
to
¿no?
tomorrow, and they
Y,
are
y
like a
lo digo
solution. This is
porque
what we have seen
ahí
in
es
the
donde
last
viene
years.
quizás
And why
algunas
am I saying this?
limitaciones, ¿no?
Because over there we have some
Voy a
limitations.
retomar el argumento de Ivonne y de Irasema, que me
I'm
parece
going to
sensacional,
take something that
porque está en la
Irasema and Ivonne
literatura
said
legal
before,
científica.
because
Que
these
cuando
belong
se
to the
gestionan, se
scientific
gobiernan cuencas
literature.
transfronterizas,
When
si quieres meter también acuíferos transfronterizos,
transboundary
el
basins
enfoque
are
es
governed
siempre
and managed,
de
and we can
arriba hacia
include
abajo.
as well aquifers.
Entonces tendríamos que
We always
pensar
have
si vamos
the
a cambiar el
top
enfoque
to bottom
de abajo hacia
approach, and we
arriba.
need to
Y
think
entonces
if we are
eso
going to
incluye, en
change
efecto, como lo ha dicho
this
Irasema,
approach going from the
incluir a
bottom
los
to the
tres niveles
top.
de gobierno.
And in that case, we need to include 3 levels of government. But in order to do so, we need to include users, water users. In Mexico, the Mexican part of SILA has been boasting citizen forums to have some discussions. However, we would say that this is not enough. There is some opinions that differ from the basin councils in Mexico and the decision made at a transnational level. We can have some councils like the Rio Bravo councils, but if when taking those decisions, they don't take into account municipalities and they don't use different mechanisms for the decision making of these transboundary basins, then the solution is going to be always the same. We would say that the approach is always from top to bottom without taking into account the users.
And now, in Mexico's case, last 6 years, last administration had a conflict by the Centrales de Oaxaca, and they won the case with a legal case, and they put in place a public consultation to see how they would co-administrate these water rights. And this is one case, and we also have another case in Comarca Lagunera, and this is closer to the border. We have already a judgment, jury verdict that has been won by the environmental activists. They haven't taken enough constructions for the maintenance of the aquifer. And it has been established by this verdict that they had to maintain and put in place again this infrastructure. And if we don't take the decision to be more prosperous and foster participation, what I mean is a more inclusive governance that empowers both countries in decision making. Of course, IBWC is a very well regarded institution in the world for water management in Mexico and the US, but this can go to worse scenarios, especially if we don't take into account water providers and users. This means a bottom to the top approach that needs to be taken. We cannot continue working like this, and we have to avoid it. This only deepens the discord and mistrust, and we have to change this way of action. That is my take on it.
We need to change the model, not just the water model, but also the governance model and the communication and the socialization of data in science and decision-making process. Irasema.
Yeah, I think that, the IBWC and the 2 treaties are really good models for other countries because I know from experience that many people from other parts of the world have come or have gone to El Paso and to Juarez to study the SILA, to understand how the IBWC works. And I know that we've had a lot of international visitors that have examined, and also academics that have examined how this works, because it is a very good model. I mean, it does work. Does it have problems? Of course it does, but it does provide a good framework to move forward, right? So one of the things that I want us to emphasize, yes, water is important, but the treaty also mandates preferential attention to border sanitation problems. And the border sanitation problems is very common in Nogales, very common in Laredo, Nuevo Laredo, and of course, the Tijuana San Diego issue, which has been forever an issue on the bilateral agenda. And I think right now it's gaining more saliency and getting more attention, if you will. because of the conditions at the plant that, they have there. I'm kind of curious, now with the government shutdown, I hope the IBWC people are still going to work. I mean, I don't know if they can, stay home or whatever, but I would hope that they're essential personnel and that they're still working, doing the things that needs to be done in terms of, looking at the treatment plants and the pumping stations and the pipelines that need to be taken care of. I think another issue that has not been mentioned but is important is salinity, because that's affecting a lot of communities and a lot of the agricultural interest in this area. And so I would like for that to also be included. I do sometimes wonder, like I know in some of the minutes, like for example, in minute 331, there was a project working group that would focus on water conservation, reuse, and irrigation modernization. I would like to know, is that working? Is that moving forward? Are there people making, reports? Is there research? I mean, what is the status of this? I know that also there was another, in the same minute, an environmental work group that was going to look at the ecological issues on the boundary streams. And then on the Colorado River, there was going to be a binational core group that would foster joint decision making. And all of these things are wonderful and terrific, but I'd like to know in practice, how is this working? And can we have more updates on how things are going in terms of the work of the the IBWC and the SILA?
I agree that we have communication issues, transparency issues, democratization, socialization of the decision-making process in terms of water. Sometimes it gets sensitive. It does get sensitive, and sometimes, I guess if we're in the edge of sharing everything or just sharing the necessary. Right.
And can I just jump in real quick,
Please.
Rosario? And sometimes exactly we don't get to hear, right? Because I've been working currently in a big project on environmental justice in Juarez. And just because of the proximity with all the people there, I learned there's this wonderful initiative of Un Observatorio del Agua that is, well, they're in the works right now, and they lost some of the funding that was coming after with the new administration and whatever, but it was an initiative by La Universidad Autónoma, la UACJ, and some private investment from one of the maquiladoras, right? And so it was a huge endeavor. They had already announced it. And they were going to be doing a whole bunch of things related to water in this particular basin. I mean, in El Paso del Norte and just this region. So yeah, where can we hear about all these initiatives, right? I think this is true. Not only, the big entities, SILA and IBWC, but what about the smaller initiatives that could make a difference locally? So like this, right? I mean, guided by universities and private sector, this was a great venture and something that could have, I mean, we're hoping that it will still happen, but now they're trying to see how they get the funding through the university and whatnot. They have other challenges that have a lot to do with their local entities as well. But what I'm saying is that there's other initiatives that should, that could be an idea to have a repository of initiatives where we could see lessons learned, good practices and whatnot on all these different issues that are related to transboundary waters. I mean, I'm talking about the transboundary water issue, but yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I have a couple of comments and questions from the audience, if you allow me to go over them quickly. There's a lot of discussion in the chat. If you want to jump into it, please feel free to jump into it, because the chat is always very intense, as well as the virtual discussion. So we have different kind of breakup rooms that are in de facto working groups in the chat that discuss specific issues. They're very, very rich. So, and this is a question from Jose Luis, or a comment, and it's in Spanish.
Under the current conditions, the IBWC is losing power in decision-making in comparison with other national
that brings
actors.
me the question that, as Gonzalo mentioned, the treaty is an institution, and so IBWC, which is the guardian of that treaty, of that institution. So I guess the crisis expands to the institutions that actually implement the treaty. Do you have any comment on that? I mean, do you think that what do we need to do? In terms of academia, we are stakeholders, right? And we have presence here at the forum of different NGOs and private citizens, and mostly academics and public and private. What should be the role in how can we, I mean, and I'm going back again to how can we protect it from our sectors if indeed we are seeing this expansion of the crisis into the institutional framework of the treaty, not just the treaty itself? Are we seeing that? Do you see that? Who wants to jump in?
Well, the last conversation that I had with some IBWC folks, that they're concerned about the funding, that they have not, that they need projects that have, built into them maintenance and things like that. That's part of the problem that happened in San Diego, and how to continue to upgrade using good technology, using the best available resources. And they were saying, funding was an issue. And I don't know. I mean, I kind of wonder, because this is a very cooperative operation, a very cooperative treaty, a very cooperative institution, how looking at the U.S.-Mexico relationship, which, I don't know how we would classify it right now. I mean, I don't know if it's it's at its best at this moment. If we raise this to another level, that, either Mexico or the U.S. might say, gee, why are we cooperating with Mexico, or why are we cooperating with the U.S. on this? We can fix our own problems. And of course, binational problems require binational solutions. And so I'm just worried about if this gets too much attention, that it will not be perceived in a positive way by both governments at this point in time.
Gonzalo, do you have an opinion on this? Or you're wondering
Sí,
what would
en
be an
efecto.
answer?
Yes,
En efecto, yo coincido
yes,
con Irasema.
I agree
El tema
with
siempre
Irasema.
va a ser la
This,
falta de dinero. No
the
hay
issue is always
financiamiento.
going to be financing.
Puede haber el interés de la academia, por ejemplo, para
And
seguir avanzando,
the
estudiando.
academy
Pero
can
si
be
no
always
tenemos
interested
programas, no tenemos
in
dinero para el
pursuing
desarrollo de nuestros
research,
proyectos de investigación,
but we can also
seguimos
lack funding,
stand-by,
and we can
parados, digamos.
keep working, we can go forward. But
Del Tratado de Aguas del 44, pues,
regarding
tiene que
the
reconocer que
1944
ambos
treaty,
tendrían que
we have to
transferir
recognize that both governments,
los gobiernos estatales en la medida en
not
que
only
puedan hacer
national governments, but
participar
also
al
federal
gobierno
governments and regional governments
limitado.
and
Pero se tienen que
city
buscar
council
formas
governments,
de
they also
financiamiento.
have to
Recordemos el
seek
caso
new
de
financing
muchos
models.
recursos desde Estados Unidos, desde el
The DAP
Congreso de
has
los
had
Estados
a
Unidos.
lot of financing
Sí hay
directly from the Congress
la
of the
voluntad
US,
política, sí hay la
and
voluntad
this is
política
political will.
de evitar
If there is a
más
political will to avoid
complicando la situación. Estoy seguro
friction,
entonces que así como México y Estados Unidos ahorita
I'm
me
sure
lo que tú decías,
it
¿no?
will improve.
Rosario,
As you said,
no,
Rosario, regarding Mexico,
los medios de comunicación la
if
idea de
these permeates into
de las aguas transfronterizas
social media and the media in general, if we talk too much about the bilateral relations between both countries, if Mexico and the US cooperate to make more efficient exchanges, have more efficient exchanges, more secure exchanges, and if both countries want to ensure the solidity of the relationship, and this requires a lot of money, why wouldn't they cooperate as well in environmental issues? because the treaty has established something, had established something new. On that time, we already discussed environmental issues, of course, but we discussed more on volume distributions or allocations. Later, we talked about quality, and now we're talking about sustainability. And I think there's some discussion on these topics, and I think we should also do it in here. And we should strengthen this type of cooperation and financing. Maybe we should think on creating binational funds, a binational fund for ESG, for example, sustainability in general. Of course, there's the North American Development Bank, where both countries are present in the decision making and the border, but this hasn't been enough. Maybe we should seek after new financing models or instruments. For instance, binational funds for green infrastructure and resilient infrastructure. We should explore new sources, not only to get more money, but also to raise to the stakes and face this challenge. Not only talk about money, but also talk about what water providers are doing and how governments are implementing new strategies to seek new water resources. But this requires money, of course, and with the sufficient political will, there will be money for it. I'm sure of it.
I can make a comment regarding that, Gonzalo. And I believe this is a pretty difficult subject, finance and financing and funding. And I ask myself, like, there's no money for that? Really? Some months ago, we were in the NatBank summit, and they announced like 400,000 millions of dollars for water infrastructure programs. That is a lot of money, but I believe that NatBank, it is an entity that works with federal funds. And I believe that their agendas are compromised. We cannot talk about funding if we are going to talk about infrastructure, agriculture, okay. But if we are going to talk about making a model like financing, like some technical assistance, because I'm talking about NATAM in particular, because I know them, I've been dealing with them this year, and they are funding the project that we are carrying out. And it was a project about environment justice. And we had to change our name, the name. We could not call it the environmental justice because this is a term that we cannot mention in today's administration. So right now we have some indicators regarding social and environment. We don't talk about environmental injustice. We talk about impacts, we talk about risk or vulnerability. So there's money, of course, but there are some agendas that are compromised, especially those agents that do have those fundings, that have some possibilities to trickle down those funds. And this is what is happening with the bank. What you say is right. We need to find these blended finance models, these binational funds that we should create or design them, or for them to be created in an organic way with these collaborations between the academia, the private industry, communities, civil societies, the local governments as well, to have these blended finance models so that we will not depend on just one funding source that is administrating everything, because this is being dangerous. When the government says something, then we just need to say, wow, what's going to happen with us? And so these communities and these projects, suddenly they don't have more funds and they are not being carried out.
on
So
top
this
of, me
is a
parece
challenge on
que le
top
estamos
of.
poniendo el cherry on the top. Pero
We're
es
just placing the cherry on
punto
the top.
identificable que
And this is
realmente
a
es nuevo,
challenge that
¿no?
we can
Porque
identify it.
yo creo
And it is
que
a new
si no
challenge as
habíamos visto,
well.
lo estamos viendo en las universidades incluso, ¿no?
This is
Cómo
something that we
las
are seeing
universidades
in
dependían tanto del
universities.
financiamiento del gobierno para la
Universities
investigación.
depended
Y hoy
on
en día
funding
vemos
from the
que
government for
esto fue un
research
riesgo a fin de
programs.
cuentas.
And
Entonces, un
nowadays,
poco
we can see that this was a
extrapolar el
huge
ejemplo, ¿no?
risk. So we need to use this
Y
example
buscar
and to
una
see
solución
what can
principal, ¿sí?
happen in our
Porque
domain
sí, el dinero
and
es
to find a
indispensable,
solution because, of course, money
pero
is
si lo
needed.
ponemos solo en un bucket,
But
e incluso el
if it is
banco
just
mismo,
in one
ellos están
pocket,
buscando estos matching
even the
funds todo el
bank,
tiempo.
they
Algo,
are
y el banco es una
trying to
institución
find
súper
other matching
que ha
funds.
sobrevivido y creo que
In the
ahora está
bank, it is
viviendo
an
un
institution
momento
that
genial
had
a pesar de
survived,
todo
and
lo
I
demás,
think they are
porque
going through
o
a
sea,
good
de por sí no
moment.
perdimos nuestro
In
financiamiento y
spite
seguimos
of everything
ejecutando el
else, we
proyecto y
did
demás,
not
y ellos,
lose all
o
the
sea, son una
fundings. We just
institución
did a
en pro
rebranding of the
de verdad
projects,
desarrollar
and they are an
vigilancia
institution are
ambiental transfronteriza.
supporting this
Pero ojo, porque
environment,
hay que ser creativos en la manera de
transboundary
cómo encontramos
things. But
estos
we need to
modelos
be
de financiamiento
creative
también.
to be able to find this funding
Porque hay que ser
and
creativos en
financing
absolutamente
models.
todo.
Yes, I believe we need to be creative.
It's not
Like,
about,
but when we talk about everything,
todo es creatividad, pero esa es una oportunidad.
we need to think
I'm
about
sorry if
creativity,
you
but
sort
of course, this is an
translated it
opportunity.
to English. I think that yes, and that's getting us back to critical words that we have used today. And I'm gonna get back to you for your final thoughts, but the critical words that we have been hearing, and that can set up like the way to move forward, or at least the way to think how to move forward on our specific roles. Creativity at every aspect, not just the legal, the governance, the water, even the way we approach resources, the way we need to start depending on probably formal institutions to protect our water resources, more into the locals, more power to the locals, more stewardship to local communities at that scale that will protect our water resources. We probably need to start relying too much on funding for the federal sort, because I mean it applies both countries. I mean it's never going to happen. It looks like not on the Mexico side, not the trend on the Mexico side, and now in the US side. So, and we don't know what's going to happen in 2 or 3 years. I mean, we live under uncertain conditions. And by the way, Gonzalo, TAP funding has been canceled indefinitely, just so you know. The Transboundary Aquifer Assessment Program as well. So anyway, those funds have been reduced and has shown us and has showed the institutions that take care of the, I guess, this local academic civil society groups to move forward in terms of science and collaboration, building trust, etc., 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 has shown us the limits. We have a limitation, strong limitation, not just financing, but also in governance systems, and also in education, also the way we react. And I'm going to go back to a comment that Gonzalo mentioned, the reactive attitude that we usually take when it comes to the 1944 treaty. And over the last, I guess, 2 or 3 cycles, we have been reacting, not preventing, not preparing, at least not to the level, to the scale of the challenge that we have. And we probably will never be able to do it at that scale, given that everything is priority right now. Everything is priority right now. So we need to focus on a mission. I think that the treaty and as an institution should focus on a mission. And that would clearly be more efficient, more successful under current conditions. So the due diligence, the bottom-up approach, the stop relying so much on formal channels to account for governance and management schemes of transboundary water issues, And I'm talking all water resources, both surface and groundwater too. Because if we thought a couple of years ago that groundwater was complicated to gain attention, I think that now it's even farther away, the way we actually approach groundwater. Gonzalo, if you want to go ahead. I don't want to take your time. Go.
Gracias, Rosario. Es como para
Thank you,
complementar.
Rosario. Yes, I would just
Es
like
una,
to
este
complement what
tema
you
es de una,
just said.
de una coordinación
We need
interinstitucional
to
impresionante.
have an
¿No? Es lo
interinstitutional
que, es como yo,
coordination.
digamos, estoy observando las cosas.
And this is what I
En
see.
México, los consejos
In
de
Mexico,
tienen
the
la facultad de
basin
tomar
councils,
decisiones en su
they
seno
have,
cuando enfrentan
they can
condiciones de
take
sequía.
decisions
De
when they
acuerdo a
are
lo que establece el
facing
monitor de sequía de
drought
América del Norte, los consejos
situations,
de cuenca tienen que
according
tomar una
to
decisión
what
sobre
the North
qué van a
America
hacer dentro
drought
del territorio de
says.
su,
So the
consejo de
councils, they
cuenca
need to take a
para
decision.
ahorrar,
What are they
llevar
going to do in
medidas
their
de eficiencia y
territories
de uso,
to
de
save,
ahorro del agua,
carry
¿cierto?
out some efficiency
Sin
measures
embargo,
to use water?
cualquier medida que se
However,
tome en el seno de los
any
consejos de
measure
cuenca
that will be
seguramente va a
taken
costar,
by these
va a tener
basin
un costo
councils
económico.
will have an
Y ese
economical
costo
cost.
económico alguien lo va a tener
And
que
this
asumir.
economical cost
Entonces,
will need to be paid
si
by
ese costo
someone.
económico,
So
en el
if
caso
that
mexicano, los
economical
gobiernos
cost
de los
in the
estados
case of
no tienen
Mexican,
el fondo
the governments of
suficiente
these
para
states,
apoyar,
they don't have
digamos
enough
que es una
money to
decisión
support.
que se tengan que
Let's
tomar
imagine that there is a decision
medidas
that
de
needs
ahorro
to be
y los que
made,
tienen que ahorrar
like
son los
for some
agricultores
saving
y va
measures.
a haber
And so
suspensión de
the people that need
cultivos
to
por un
save
tiempo.
are farmers,
¿Cómo se va
so
a
they will
indemnizar
not
al
be
agricultor?
able
Oigan,
to
¿con
farm.
qué dinero? ¿No?
How
Para que
are
descanse
we
las
going
tierras. Entonces,
to pay the
ahí
farmer so that he
entra,
will not
estoy
be
retomando
working on the land?
el argumento que planteó
And
Irasema,
I'm
por supuesto,
taking the
Ivonne, el
argument
papel
shared
de las
by
ONCs,
Irasema
¿no? Entonces,
and Ivonne.
ahí los
We need to
gobiernos
take
de
into
los estados
account the
necesitan tener
role of
dinero
different actors. And
para
in that
poder apoyar
case,
esas
the
decisiones de
governments of
ahorro
the
y de
different
corte
states, they need to
en un
have money
sentido
to be able to
de agua
support the
urbana.
saving
Recordemos lo
decisions.
que sucedió en
Or
Monterrey cuando se habló,
let's
recuerden del
remember
famoso
what
día cero,
happened in
¿no?
Monterrey
Que es
when we were talking about
los medios
the
de
day
comunicación
zero.
haciendo su agosto, diciendo, no, ya
And
sé lo que hacer,
the
¿no?
media,
Y
they were
entonces, ¿cómo
just
salió
being there and
cómo lo
sharing many
solucionó
things.
supuestamente, entre otras medidas que tomó el gobierno federal
What was the
en la ciudad de
solution
Monterrey? Pues fue que
by
algunos
the federal
concesionarios
government
industriales
together with the Monterrey City?
compartieron volúmenes de agua
Some
reales, ¿no? que se
industrial
iban a introducir a la
commissions, they
ciudad
were
para combatir
sharing
la
real
falta
water
de
volumes
agua, ¿no? Entonces,
to
todo
face
esto, pues,
this lack of
más
water.
que, además de la voluntad política, que es lo que yo he
So
insistido
apart
también
from the
en mi
political
intervención,
will, this is something that
también
I
se
have
necesita
highlighted in
financiación,
my
¿no? Entonces,
intervention. Of
también
course, we
no solo
also
son los
need
fondos financieros, sino
that
todos los
money.
dineros
We're not only
que ha
talking about
aportado el
binational
Congreso de
funds.
Estados
It is
Unidos
not
o que
just
podría aportar
money
también
given by the
en una
United
decisión
States
histórica que
Congress
ahorita, imagínense que en México los
or
diputados y los senadores aprueban un
the
dinero
deputies
para apoyar esos fondos,
of
también
Mexico,
los
for
gobiernos de
example.
los
No, it is
estados
not only
necesitan,
that.
porque son los que están más
The
cerca,
governments of the
apoyar a los
states also
concesionarios
need that money, and the
de agua.
governments
Ese
of
es
the
un elemento
states
para
need
mí que
to
creo que
support
es también
water
estratégico.
commissions. This is a key
Gracias.
element for me. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Gonzalo. Irasema,
Thank you very much,
final
Gonzalo.
comment?
Well, I think, you know, the treaty that was signed back in 1944, how do we adapt it to the complex realities of the 21st century? You know, the climate variation, the urbanization, the environmental concerns, the sanitation issues. I mean, it's complicated, right? But I think that we need to find a way to have more inclusion of local, state, and county governments, and also to have the technical work that needs to be done, but also have the local stakeholders and binational teams working together. I would like to see more integration. And I agree 100% with Gonzalo. If we don't have political will, we're not going to get anything done. How do we make that happen? I would like for there to be more planning in terms of agriculture, industrialization, urbanization, and how we are going to, you know, here in the Southwest, how are we going to deal with this growing population, with the urbanization, with the very water intensive agriculture that we have? And how are we going to make sure that we share water adequately with our neighbor? I would like for the IBWC to also really embrace their mandate of doing research. I mean, under the treaty, the IBWC is empowered to study, investigate, and report on dams, international works, flood control, sanitation, and other matters. I mean, I know that that takes time and energy, and maybe this takes away from the work that they need to do, the technical work that they need to do, but I think we also need to know what's going on. And how do we make sure that that happens, right? I'm a very big advocate for binational cooperation and working with people at the local level. So I would hope that there are mechanisms in place that we can really all come together, because again, a binational problem requires binational solutions, and we need to move this forward. Because I do fear for the future of the region if we don't work together.
Agree. Ivonne, one last comment?
Right, I think Irasema hit it right on. Yeah, a good example will be the what was it, the Commission for Border Governors, right? That used to, what was the name? They weren't really successful in making things happen, right?
Border Governors Conference?
Yes, the Border Governors
Yes.
Conference, I'm sorry. But this was a space where a lot of things were taken into consideration, and the discussions were actually very fruitful. And then if we can redo this, or kind of those were the things that really worked. I mean, they weren't as action driven, but it was a space for collaboration and cooperation. Then we needed to add the coordination aspect of it. But for sure, this was a space where, all these people who were decision makers were able to sit together and just discuss those issues that were inherent to their administrations, to their people, to their constituents and whatnot. So for sure, this kind of spaces should be promoted and kept sacred within the border to discuss issues as relevant as water, for sure, climate issues, social issues, and then the future of the binational relation, for sure.
Thank you, Ivonne. And with that, flexibility, creativity, which was it's an opportunity, collaboration and coordination, bottom-up approaches, more inclusion of states and cities in the decision-making process, transparency, of course, new models, not just numerical models, but actually communication models across and within our own countries. And political will, which, if you don't mind, I will change it to political obligation, because it is their obligation. It's not their will. It's not what they wanted or not. Anyway, with that, Samuel, I'm gonna get back to you if you have any questions or comments from the audience, because I see that there was a private discussion there with you and others in the chat.
We're having a lot of good discussions here, and I mean, perhaps one of the discussions that I was having con Ismael, I think that's super cool. And perhaps my point is that I think sometimes we're asking for the 3D everything, and it's not that it. So, I mean, I was just bringing, like, again, this will be Samuel mentioning in 2025, since 2002, we were working on the Reglamento de Aguas de la Cuenca del Río Bravo, the interstate compact agreement between Mexico's states, 2002, we're in 2025, 23 years after, it hasn't happened. And then, so that will be one way to actually help out the treaty. We have the Texas Water Master, and that's another one. The Rio Grande Compact, and that's another one. The Colorado River Compact, and that's another one. We have in between the states, the QSA, for instance, for California, and that's another one. So this is kind of like telescopic, right? Some of the things that I think we're asking that, I think the treaty may need some help in there. We were kind of referring a lot of the things from Gonzalo, Irasema, that conditions have changed, that minutes can include climate change. I do think that just specifically with the minutes, that they have been more reactive. And I think, I don't know, this is extremely super sad. Aquifers, it is also something that are missing there. So anyway, we're having, if you look at the, we are having a good discussion over here. I do think that I agree with you, Rosario. It is not the will, it's an obligation, right? Like, we voted for decision makers to make a decision. I think the thing here is that if there is something for sure, is that things cannot stay the same. The Colorado River, I mean, it's the Meade and Powell, they are empty. In the Rio Grande, we have half of the water delivery submitted. So Meade is more than half empty, is 35. It's only 35% full. So, and those are just indicators. I think we need to do something, like we have to do something. And it is not that we are asking, we are demanding. I think we should change we should be asking, or we should be demanding, and not political will, political obligation. So anyways, super cool. And then, yeah, catching questions here.
If I may add just
Okay,
one
guys.
thing, if I
Go
may
ahead,
add just one,
Irasema.
I just want to say thing that I had it in my notes and I forgot to mention. We all need to be acutely aware of the AI data centers that are being built in many communities that require an inordinate amount of water. And that's going to be another challenge that it needs to be taken into account.
Yeah, and the potential opening for the energy, shale gas on the lower Rio Grande, on the Mexico side, which will also require a lot of water for fracking. So new users, new uses, the demand is just going to keep growing. It's not going to be reduced, and our water systems are at the limit. So yes, we demand, as Sam said, an important change, a creative change, and we are here to help. So thank you guys for joining us. This was very enlightening, very rich, and I'm sure that our audience here was honestly, I mean, delighted by hearing you. And this space is created by the forum. It's for all of you, and it's from you for all of you. So in order to discuss, to express, to liberate energy, of course, and provide options, solutions, understanding what are the conditions that we truly face. And I'm going to say this in Spanish because my husband likes to say this to me every time that I dream about something. He says,
Listen, you need to sit down with your reality.
That was a strong statement, like, oh, okay, where am I? So we first need to understand where we are and what are our capabilities, limitations, and perspectives. And from there on, plan. So this is where we are. And we are at the top of the mountain right now. Where should we go from here? Thank you, Irasema. Thank you, Gonzalo.
gracias.
Thank you, Ivonne. This was great. This was awesome. This coffee break is being recorded as every other one, both English and Spanish. So it will be available for you on YouTube for those that were unable to connect in our YouTube channel. And if you have any comments, options, please just send them over to the forum. We're happy to have you. And thank you to all the audience that stayed together for this hour and a half of this great discussion. Bravo!